Hey Browns fans! We're headed to another matchup, but things don't seem to be looking too good around here, so let's get right to it. So hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. First, there's some good news on the injury front, especially for those of you keeping an eye on our offense. David Njoku, our star tight end, is finally back in practice after being sidelined since week 1 with that ankle injury against the Cowboys. Njoku's absence was a huge blow to the Browns' offense, and his return couldn't come at a better time with our game against the Raiders looming. Now, we all know that returning to practice is one thing, but getting back on the field on Sunday, that's another story. Njoku's injury was reportedly a high ankle sprain, and that could be tricky. While it's great to see him out there again, there's still some concern about whether he'll be fully ready for game day, especially when you factor in the cross-country trip to Vegas. We'll have to keep an eye on how things progress, but fingers crossed that he's back in action this weekend. We'll also be keeping an eye on the Raiders' injury report, which is expected to come out later today. With 11 players between the Browns and Raiders missing practice earlier this week, that's going to be a key factor in this matchup. Okay, now let's address the elephant in the room, Myles Garrett. He's been an absolute warrior for this team, but it's no secret that he's been dealing with multiple injuries. 3 games into the season, and he's already battling foot, Achilles, and hamstring issues. That's a lot to handle, especially for a guy who's such a crucial part of our defense. Garrett himself has been very open about his injuries, admitting that his snap count has been limited in recent weeks. But as always, he's focused on what's right in front of him, the Week 4 game against the Raiders. "We don't talk about the whole season," Garrett said. "We're taking it one game at a time." And that's the mindset Garrett is taking. He knows his body needs rest, but he's determined to get to the bye week before taking a step back. The problem? That bye week is still 6 weeks away. And with some of the toughest games on our schedule coming in November and December, the timing couldn't be worse. While he's clearly not 100%, Garrett's mindset is to contribute what he can. "Just manage as we go," he said. "We have a lot of days to do this. I try to spend every moment preparing my body for the rigors of the season and sometimes some bumps and bruises like I have right now. A bruised animal is the most vicious, so I'm going to give it my all." That's the spirit we love about Garrett, but there's no denying that these injuries are affecting his game. Last week against the Giants, he was on the field for just 58% of the team's defensive snaps. It's tough to see one of our best players spending so much time on the sideline or in the medical tent. But Garrett, being the competitor that he is, refuses to make excuses. He's been there before and has played through injuries in the past. As long as he can still make a positive impact, you know he'll be out there giving it his all. He admitted he's been limited, but he's not one to complain. "Everybody's dealing with their own issues, whether it's physically or mentally," Garrett said. "Mine are very apparent. So we're going to make them do well, and then I'll be out there playing the best I can." So, Browns fans, where does this leave us heading into Week 4? We have a lot riding on the health of these 2 key players, Njoku and Garrett. If Njoku can get back on the field and Garrett can manage his injuries effectively, we have a much better chance of beating the Raiders. But it will take a lot of courage from both of them to do it. What do you think? Are you confident that Njoku will be back in time to make a difference? And how do you feel about Garrett overcoming these injuries? Now, it's no secret that the Cleveland Browns haven't had the best start this season, sitting at 1-2 after 3 games. And while we're all hoping the team can turn things around, there's been a lot of talk about possible trades before the NFL deadline. If things don't improve soon, we may have to say goodbye to some familiar faces. So let's break down the 3 players who are most likely to be traded if the Browns don't get back on track. First up, Elijah Moore, wide receiver. Moore is in the final year of his contract, and it's looking less and less likely that the Browns will re-sign him. He's had 11 catches for 70 yards so far this season, with his best game in Week 2 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But here's the thing, with the addition of Jerry Jeudy and the emergence of young talents like Cedric Tillman and Jamari Thrash, Moore's role might keep shrinking. If the Browns decide they won't bring him back next season, it might make sense to trade him now while they can still get some value. What do you think? Would you be sad to see him go? Next on the list, Greg Newsome, our cornerback. There was already trade speculation surrounding Newsome earlier this offseason, but the Browns held on to him. He's got one more year left on his contract, with a price tag of $13.4 million for 2025. That's a big number, and with Denzel Ward already extended and Martin Emerson Jr. coming up for a new deal soon, it might be hard for the Browns to justify keeping Newsome around. He's a solid player, no doubt, but the Browns' pass defense hasn't been great, currently ranked 15th in the league. And let's face it, good cornerbacks are always in demand, so Newsome could fetch a good return if the team decides to move him. And finally, let's talk about the big name, Amari Cooper. This is the one that might hurt the most for some fans. Cleveland didn't extend Cooper during the offseason, which is a pretty clear sign that they expect him to hit free agency next March. If the Browns don't start winning soon, there's a good chance Cooper could be traded before the November 5th deadline. Even though he hasn't had the best start this season, there are plenty of teams out there that would love to add a receiver of Cooper's caliber. And in return, the Browns could score some valuable draft picks, setting themselves up for the future. Would you be willing to part ways with Cooper if it meant getting solid draft capital in return? So there you have it, Browns fans, those are the three players most likely to be traded if things don't turn around soon. It's tough to think about losing key players, but that's part of the game, especially when a season isn't going the way you hoped. What do you think about these possible trades? Would you be okay with the team moving on from Moore, Newsome, or Cooper if it means building for the future? Heading into Sunday's matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders, there's one player we all need to keep an eye on, Maxx Crosby. It's been a bit of a roller coaster week for Crosby now, as he missed practice on Wednesday and Thursday with an ankle injury. But make no mistake, he's a three-time Pro Bowler and a perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Crosby has been a monster on the field, playing 93% of the snaps this season, and Myles Garrett himself has a lot of respect for Crosby, saying, "He's 100% every time he steps on the field." Now, when you look at the Raiders' defensive stats, it's clear that they've been blitzing at one of the highest rates in the NFL. That puts immense pressure on our offensive line, which has struggled with injuries and protection. Last week, we saw Deshaun Watson commit a career-high 8 sacks against the Giants, and we can't let that happen again. Guard Joel Bitonio emphasized that the key to success is getting back to fundamentals. "If you're getting beat, you've got to get your fundamentals right," he noted. That's something we'll need to see this week to effectively protect Watson. There's a silver lining, though. The Raiders have struggled against the run, allowing an average of 152.7 yards per game, which is 4th worst in the league. This could be an opportunity for the Browns to establish a solid running game, something we've struggled to do thus far. Head coach Kevin Stefanski stressed the need for our offense to get back on track and be efficient. "It's important for us to be explosive when it's available to us," he said, emphasizing the running game as a critical focus for this matchup. On the other hand, the Raiders' secondary, while solid, has given up some big plays this season. There's potential for our wide receivers, including Amari Cooper, to exploit those weaknesses. So, Browns fans, what do you think? Can we bounce back against a strong Raiders defense? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more updates. Go Browns!